The following program is brought to you by the Center for Educational Outreach at Baylor College of Medicine.
I'm going to have to give my disclaimer, too, of financial support. I receive funding from Autism Speaks through the Autism Treatment Network grant, and they are actually funding my participation in this evening. So, we're going to talk tonight about parental stress. Parenting in general is a very stressful event. It's more so when you have a child with a developmental disorder, or when you have a child that has anything that is medically or developmentally not going the way you had planned. So we're going to start by talking about what stress is. Stress is a normal physical reaction that you have to an event that either makes you feel threatened or that upsets your sense of balance. So this can be anything from standing in front of a crowd to hearing a bad diagnosis or a diagnosis that you don't want to hear, to being in trouble with your boss, those types of things. So it can be a wide variety of different things that will cause stress. Okay, so stressors are events that provoke stress, and stressors can be positive, they can be negative, or they can be neutral. Again, they can kind of range from that emergency situation, such as 9/11, or to a more increase in just pressure when there's actually no real danger to you, but you're just kind of feeling more intense pressure to you. They can be short-term and they can be chronic. As a parent of a child with a disability or developmental disorder, you actually have both short-term and chronic stressors going on. When we feel stress, we're going to have kind of two reactions. We're either going to fight or we're going to flee. So we're either going to kind of have an automatic response where we're going to stand up and face it, or we're going to have an automatic response where we're going to actually try to escape from the situation. This is an automatic process. It happens very, very rapidly. It involves absolutely no thought at all. But it leads to you being more focused, more alert, and it allows us to kind of draw on our strengths and some of our stamina that we have. So the stress response starts at the top where we have the stressor. Then our hypothalamus, which is in our brain, will trigger our adrenal glands to release different types of adrenaline and cortisol. This makes our breathing go up, our heart rate go up, our blood pressure go up, our metabolism increase. This in turn causes there to be an increase in blood flow to your large muscles, so you can flee if you need to. Your pupils will dilate, your liver will release glucose, which will allow you to have more energy, and you start to sweat. And all this happens in a split second. So when it's working correctly, this allows you to perform well under pressure. So when it's working right, this is going to allow you to be able to face things that you're stressed by and continue to be able to perform at an optimal level. Problems happen when either the system overreacts, you become stressed when things are not stressful. When it fails to turn off, you remain in that very heightened level of arousal, or the system fails to reset itself. So when you are faced with a stressor, you've used up all the stress hormones and you don't have any response at all. Over the long term, stressful situations can lead to chronic stress, and this is a continued activation of your nervous system. So your nervous system is in constant arousal and constant alert, which is not good for your body. So when your pressures are too intense or they last too long, it really can overwhelm your body's ability to cope, and it leads to what we call stress overload. Stress overload is something that we see fairly commonly in parents of children with developmental disorders. Now, a little bit more about stress. Our body doesn't differentiate between a physical threat and a psychological threat. So we're going to have the exact same response to seeing something that's frightening as we would to being with a bear, in the same room with a bear. So your body's going to respond in exactly the same way, whether you're in physical danger or just psychological danger. Because parents with children with chronic illnesses and developmental disorders have this kind of emergency stress on all the time, they get that stress overload. So either it's not turning off or it's not activating the way that it should. So where does stress come from for families of children with developmental disorders? One of the best models of stress is by a man named Bronfenbrenner, and it was rewritten by Beckman and Dunstan, Trivett, and Deal. And what they're talking about is there's kind of 4 levels of systems that impact on families or impact on people with their stress. So the first is the microsystem, and that is your immediate family. Those are the people that are in your immediate family structure. They're your resources, the people that you have interactions with on a regular basis. And it includes the patterns of your interactions with the people in your family, the experiences that your family's had, the beliefs that individual family members have. So with children with developmental disorders, it can be problem behaviors, it can be uneven or unusual courses of development where kids have some areas of development that are typical and then other areas that are atypical, and it can be the marital relationship. We're going to talk a lot tonight about the marital relationship. The mesosystem is the relationship between the settings in which the child participates. So this is your team of people that are working with your child. So this includes your relationship with your professionals that are working and the interactions that you have. So it's going to be looking at things like parental satisfaction with services, how well there's communication between the parent and the professionals, and just generally how satisfied you are with what you're getting for your child. We all know that there's many things that impact on that particular system. The exosystem is the social structures and the organizations that you have to participate in directly with. So this is the policies and practices of organizations. This is the kind of the diagnostic process, how you interact with the special education system, how you interact with the hospital clinics, how you interact with all the different types of doctors that you're having to interact with. It also can include the insurance companies. Actually, I think the insurance company is probably the biggest stressor within that whole group right there. Then we have the macro system, which is kind of the larger social and cultural context that you're living in. So the political trends, the economic conditions, the culturally based views of disability. I mean, right now we're in a bit of a economic downturn, and so there's a lot of difficulty accessing services because families can't afford co-pays. So it's kind of a combination of that exo and macro system both coming to play on a family and causing stress. Language differences can also be a big impact in this particular area. If you don't speak English and all the providers that are working with your child are English speaking, that can be very, very stressful for families. Okay, so common stressors for families of children with developmental disorders. Obviously, you've got all the normal stressors of being a parent. Children are stressful people. But when you have a child with a difference, you also have another level of stress. First, you have to go through the whole process of diagnosis. What is wrong with my child? There's something not right. There's something developmentally different. There's something that's not the way that it should be. And going through that process of getting a diagnosis is an incredibly stressful process because you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what they're going to find. You're anticipating certain things. You're not anticipating other things. And it's just a very stressful event for families. Once you've gotten a diagnosis, then you have to find the appropriate services. You've got to find those team members to be on your child's medical team. Your speech therapist, your occupational therapist, your behavior therapist, your physical therapist, the different doctors that are going to treat the child's medical conditions. So you've got to find all those people and bring them together to work with your child. Then you have the just general stressors of caring for your child with special needs. The increase in the demands on families or parents that have children with developmental disorders is incredible. You have to make and get to all these appointments. You have to keep track of medications. You have to keep track of all the different types of things that need to be happening during the day. You've got to do the interventions that the therapists have given you to do at home. The amount of time and energy that it takes is just astronomical. You've got to establish your teams. You've got to choose the school. If you're working with the public schools, you've got to fight a little bit about what types of services you want your child to get. And then we have the transition to adulthood and adolescence. Adolescence, as many of you know, is a very stressful time for parents. It's not so stressful for them, but it's very stressful for us. And again, with kids with developmental disorders, it's compounded because their bodies are doing adolescent things, even if their minds are not adolescent minds yet. And that can be very, very stressful. So, diagnostic stress. Again, you're going through that whole process. You're having all these different doctors look at your child. They're doing all this testing. They're making you wait and wait and wait to find out. So sometimes getting the diagnosis is a relief. You finally know what's wrong. You finally know what you need to do. But a lot of times there's a lot of anxiety or anger or sadness when you actually get that diagnosis confirmed. Sometimes finding out can be very, very, very traumatic. And then sometimes diagnostic clarity is really elusive. We don't know. We know that there's something wrong in this area, but we really can't pinpoint what it is. And I think in some ways that may be the worst for parents, is when we can't give a definitive answer about what's going on or why it's happening. And sometimes it's just not well communicated by the professionals. The other thing that we find a lot is that if a child is older at the time of diagnosis, if they're in that 7, 8, 9-year-old range, there's a lot of mourning about missed opportunities. You're past that early intervention period, and we all know that early intervention is has a lot of impact. So we often see a lot of mourning at that point from parents about that. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on stress-wise. So how do you know if you're having stress? There are basically 4 areas of symptoms. There are cognitive symptoms, there are emotional symptoms, there are behavioral symptoms, and there are physical symptoms. Cognitively, you may start noticing that you're having some memory problems, maybe some inability to concentrate. You may make bad decisions at times. May get kind of a negative approach to the world, may start viewing things in a very negative manner. Nothing's ever going to work out. It's just not going to happen right. Some folks get anxious or get racing thoughts. And some people just engage in just constant worry. Some people have emotional symptoms. They get moody, they get irritable, short-tempered, or they get really agitated and can't relax. These are the folks that have problems falling asleep at night. Feeling overwhelmed, feeling very lonely and isolated. That's something that I hear a lot from families, is feeling very isolated from their friends that they had before the diagnosis who don't understand their child and their child's diagnosis, and even from the people within their support groups. And then depression is pretty common also. Physically, lots of aches and pains, upset stomach, chest pains, feeling dizzy, loss of sex drive, lots of colds, just kind of getting every little illness that goes around. And then behaviorally, you may start doing a lot of things that are kind of self-destructive, eating more or eating less, not getting enough sleep at night, isolating yourself from your support systems and the people that are your people that are going to help you. Procrastinating, that's my favorite one, or neglecting responsibilities. Alcohol and cigarettes and drugs, or developing nervous habits, picking your skin, pacing, nail biting, pornography sometimes. So, what do we need to do to manage stress? We all now know that you have stress, in case you didn't know that before you got here. We know you have stress. There are 4 factors that the research has found that are related to a decrease in stress in families or parents who are parenting a child with a disability. The first is that strong marital relationship. The stronger the marriage, the more you can weather together. The second is having a very strong social network, a very strong social support system. The third is having good problem-solving skills. And the fourth is good financial resources. Okay, we can't do anything about that fourth one, but we can do things about the first 3. So, marital relationships. I read recently that close to 50% of all marriages in the United States end in divorce. That's not a great statistic for our country, because we all know that children do better in two-parent homes. When a child has been diagnosed with a developmental disorder, this percentage does go up because of the stress that's associated with parenting. And part of the reason for that is that both parents are very, very deeply impacted by the process of the diagnosis. First we have the frustration about the amount of time it takes to get a diagnosis. There's often a lot of resentment or anger at the doctors or the other experts who've entered your life and are trying to tell you how to parent and how to take care of your child and what you should be doing. There's a lot of distress about kind of loss of hopes and loss of dreams. There's a true grief process that many families go through after there's a diagnosis of a disorder. And it mirrors the same diagnosis or the same grief process you have if your child had died, because in some ways the child that you thought you had doesn't exist any longer. When both partners are distressed, obviously it's very hard for them to provide support to one another. Part of that process is that men and women also have very different approaches to dealing with stress, or very different approaches to coping. It's very important to be patient and try to understand where your partner's coming from. I hear lots of anger going back and forth between partners about how the other partner is coping. And what we have found in the research is that mothers typically ask, "What did I do? Why is my child this way? Did I do something that caused this?" And the fathers move immediately to, "What can I do? What can we do to fix this? How are we going to make this better?" And when you start out at that very different place, even at the moment of diagnosis, then your goals may not be the same at that point, and there may be some conflict between the two spouses, where one is doing a little bit more mourning, perhaps, than the other, and the husband may be pushing, "We got to get this intervention and this intervention and this intervention," and the wife may be saying, "But why is my child this way? Why did this happen to us?" So those very different coping styles can really impact on your relationships, and is often a source of stress. So what do we need to do? You got to make your marriage the first priority. We know that if you take care of each other, then you can take care of the rest of your family. Nothing should be more important than your marriage. And that's a really hard thing to hear when you have a child that has so many needs and you need to do so many things to keep your child moving forward. But no matter what your child's disorder is, your children need to come second to your relationship. Even children that are profoundly impaired are impacted by your relationship. They are sensing your emotions and how you're getting along with one another. So as your stress level goes up and your conflict in your marital relationship increases, your child is going to respond to that, and is also going to get escalated up on some levels. So the most important thing is really focusing on your marriage and making sure that you're maintaining that relationship. It's hard to do that when there's only 24 hours in a day. Again, your marriage is the foundation of your family. Children don't feel secure and don't grow their best if they're living in an insecure environment. So you want to provide them with the most security that you can provide them. The more you obviously love one another and work hard with each other, the more your child's going to feel that security. And so the basic message is, if you're not okay, your child's not going to be okay either. So how do you put your marriage first? It's great to say it, isn't it? It's a lot harder to do it. One of the keys is not letting your child's disability or disorder become your entire life. Some families will completely leave behind people that they were friends with before their child was diagnosed, and only have friends that have children who also have those diagnoses or who have other types of developmental disorders. And all they focus on is getting the next intervention, finding the next intervention. They surf the web all night, every night, looking for the next big thing. And before they know it, the rest of their life has fallen to the wayside. They don't have friends anymore. They don't have a support system anymore. They don't have hobbies anymore. They're not exercising. They're not eating. They're not sleeping right. And this happens a lot. So it's very important that you not let your child's disorder take over your life. You got to work on your marriage. That intimacy that is in a marital relationship is something that requires work even under the best circumstances. So when you've got a lot of stress, it's important that you work on it even more. Sex is an important part of the marital relationship, but intimacy does not always equal sex. And that's a real key that folks have to kind of think about when you're talking about your relationship and creating that intimacy with your partner. Sex is important, but sometimes you're just too tired. So you've got to kind of give your partner a break and not push the issue. That may be a difference between men and women, I think. Again, the next thing you've got to do is develop that strong support system. Again, not allowing your child's disability to become your entire life. You need friends who don't have children with disorders or disabilities. You need relationships with people who you just go and have fun with. You need relationships with people who don't know anything about your child or your children. And it's critical that you have other people to communicate with on a regular basis. Human beings are kind of created to interact with one another. We're very, very social beings. We want to talk about our feelings. We want to talk about things that are going on. If you cut yourself off from other adults in your life, then you don't have that group of people to talk about those things with. Your friends and your family and your support groups, or even a therapist, can be somebody that you can share these feelings and these thoughts with. And it's important that you share them, because if you don't share them and talk about them and kind of get them out, they're going to build up and build up and build up. And then you're going to end up even more stressed in some ways. So, adults who don't spend time with other adults, research has shown, often begin to resent their schedules, their lives, and their children. The last thing you want to do is resent your children. And it's important to remember that you can talk about things other than your child's disorder, other than autism, other than Angelman syndrome, other than Rett syndrome. Talk about other things. Remember that you have other interests. You have other things that you can talk about. Your support network is going to be your best emotional buffer against stress. So developing that group and maintaining that group is going to be very, very important. Your sense of control is going to impact on your stress. Unfortunately, as parents of children with developmental disorders, you're going to feel a loss of control a lot because you can't control the progress, how fast they're making the progress, what types of interventions they're getting sometimes, how often they're getting them. You can't do everything that you want to do. But your sense of control, your ability to kind of persevere and feeling like you can impact on events is going to be very, very important. So you need to find the things that you can impact on so that you have that feeling of success and that feeling of control. Other things that go into stress tolerance include just kind of your general attitude and outlook on life. There are folks that we call stress-hardy people, people that handle stress really, really well and maintain that optimistic attitude. Sometimes they can be annoying, but there are folks that can really maintain that really positive, happy approach to the world, even when things are very, very stressful. You need to be able to know how to calm yourself, how to deal with your own feelings. How do you bring yourself back down when you're upset? How do you calm and soothe? And again, you want to do those in a positive manner, not through drugs and alcohol or overeating or not sleeping, but through more positive things. And then increasing your knowledge. being prepared. We know that information helps with coping. Sometimes we give you too much information. As doctors, we know that. We try to give you all the information you might need in a very short period of time, just because you might need it someday. And by the time you need it, you've forgotten that we've given it to you most of the time. So increasing your knowledge base, looking for information, asking for information from your providers. Even if they've given it to you before, they'll give it to you again. It's going to help with coping. Maintaining your own health. Mental health and physical health are critical. You've got to treat your body well. We know that exercise helps with stress reduction. It's important for both your mental and your physical health. You need to treat your mind well by maintaining some hobbies, activities that you enjoy doing. You've got to have fun. And you've got to pace yourself. And this is a really hard one for families right now. It's really hard to not try to do everything and to make sure that you're wanting to please everybody and not being able to please everybody. And this is especially true if you have other children that don't have developmental disorders. You're kind of feeling pulled between the two sets of kids. My child that needs to go to this therapy and this therapy and this therapy, but I have my other child who I want to put in baseball and softball and Girl Scouts, and feeling that tug between which direction do I go. So you've got to be able to pace yourself and recognize that you can't do everything. And it's okay if you can't do everything. Give yourself a break. Be realistic. What can I do? What can I control? What can I fix? What can I take care of? If you need help, ask for help. A lot of people are waiting for you to ask for help. They don't know how to offer it to you. But if you ask for it, people typically will come around and help. Ask for help. Get enough sleep. This is hard when you've got kids with developmental disorders who often don't sleep very well themselves. Finding time to get enough sleep for you is going to be important. We know that if you're not getting enough sleep, then you're not going to be thinking clearly, you're not going to be attending well, you're not going to make good decisions, you're going to be more moody. All those things I talked about with stress, those things all go with sleep deprivation too. So getting enough sleep is important. For adults, that means between 7 and 8 hours a night. For younger kids and adolescents, that could be up to 10 hours a night. How many people here are getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night? Yeah, not me either, so I'm pretty good at saying it, but you know, it's going to be a very important thing to get that much sleep. And finding ways to help your child sleep so that you can sleep. Finding the areas in your life that you can control. We need to control things. That's part of human nature also. And the feeling of loss of control is incredibly high when you have a child with an illness or a disorder that requires you to interact with lots of different systems. So figure out the things that you can control and take care of those. You've got to balance that feeling of loss of control with having some positive things. We talk about that with our children. We've got to give them as many, twice as many positives as we give them negatives. You need that too in your life. It's not just your kids that need that. You need to have those feelings also. Obtain information. Again, ask us for information. We will give it to you. Get help for your child's problem behaviors. If there's certain things your child is doing, ask for help. Get some help. And keep asking. The first things may not work. You have to keep trying. So that perseverance is going to be very important. Get the help for the problem behaviors that are causing you the most difficulty. Learning to relax. I'm going to give you, there's a website called the Inner Health Studio. And they have all these free relaxation downloads. They have all these different scripts for relaxation. They have guided imagery. They're just really nice little relaxation things. They have a 5-minute one. They have one that lasts for 30 minutes. And so they have a wide variety of things that you can access. So learning to relax is going to be very, very important. Watching what you're thinking, trying to maintain that hope and that optimism. And hope can be very hard to maintain at times. Solve the little problems. Again, if you can take care of something, take care of it so that you don't feel so overwhelmed. Little things add up. And then build your resilience. Recognize that the stressors are also opportunities for growth, and that most stressors are temporary problems. Your child is going to change. Your child is going to have some differences. There are things you're going to be able to do to really impact on your child and your child's life and quality of life. Finding those things is going to be the hard part. But building that resilience and finding those things can be very helpful. You want to engage in really healthy problem-focused coping strategies. So you want to make small goals and keep track of your progress. Don't make the goal this big. If you make the goal this big, you're not going to see the progress. You want to break that goal down into small pieces that you can then master and get some success and feel that, again, sense of control. Avoid those unhealthy coping strategies, substance use, overeating, types of things. They may numb it for a while, but in the long run, they make things much, much worse. Learn your stress signals. So when you think about those 4 categories where people can show stress, it's important to think, and it may help your partner think, about what are my stress signals? How do I know that I am stressed? Because oftentimes we don't know it until it's blown up. And so being able to recognize the steps that you're going through as you're getting to that stress level means you can intervene early before you have the big blow up. Remember that change is a challenge and a normal part of life, and seek professional help when you need to. One of the things that I talk with families about is, does the therapist that you work with as an adult need to understand your child's developmental disorder? It's great if they do, but they don't have to. The person is there to help you deal with stress. You can tell them about the areas of your child's development that are causing you stress, or the areas of your child's behavior that are causing you stress. They don't need to already understand and know those things. And so I hear a lot of families saying, well, I can't go to that therapist because he doesn't understand autism. He doesn't understand Prader-Willi. Adult therapists are set up to learn those things as you teach them and you tell them about your stress level and what's causing you stress. They don't need to know your child. So give the adult therapist a chance. There are some crisis line numbers that we're going to give you guys to look at support. Some of these are national numbers. We also have phone numbers for you for help for your child. Again, we're talking about the need to treat the behavioral concerns that your child is experiencing. These are just some of the major groups here in the Houston area: the Harris County MHMRA, the Gulf Coast Center, Texana Center, and DePelchin that can offer different types of help. There are also a number of different groups at Texas Children's Baylor College of Medicine who can also offer support and help in various forms, including the Autism Center, the Psychology Service, the Psychiatry Service, Developmental Pediatrics, and Genetics. So there's a wide variety of folks that you can choose from within Texas Children's Baylor College of Medicine. Oops, I spelled Baylor wrong. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is siblings, because siblings are an important part of the family, and they can be a source of stress for you, but it's important to also understand that their developmentally different sibling is a source of stress for them also. We know by the research that there's a lot of positive effects to having a sibling with a developmental disorder, There's some negative effects to having it, and there's a lot of things that as parents you can do to kind of mediate that and make it less negative and more positive. The research has shown us that siblings of children with developmental disorders often have just a greater level of maturity. They have a stronger sense of responsibility and loyalty, and they tend to be kind of more caring and compassionate and independent and a lot more tolerant because they've learned to be tolerant in their own home. On the negative side, we do see a lot of resentment of siblings talking about being angry about the amount of time and energy that the parents spend on the sibling with a developmental disorder and not spending that level of time with them. Some children feel guilty about being healthy and not having the problems that their sibling has. Many of them are dealing with some high parental expectations. They feel the need to be more and better because they have a sibling that is not as functional as they are. So they may become overachievers and become very stressed by that need to overachieve. Anxiety is very common. So as you're anxious about things that are going on and things that your child is doing, they are also anxious about things that are going on and things that their brother or sister are doing. And then there's typically a lot of restriction in their social activities. Again, you can't be at therapy and Girl Scouts at the same time. And so families often have to choose which one they're going to do. And so sometimes the typically developing child will feel that their social life is being restricted because of the needs of the child with a developmental disorder. Anybody experiencing those with their typically developing children? Yeah. So what can you do to help? Special time. Special time is a concept that was developed to work on parent-child relationships in families where that has fallen apart. But what we've discovered is that all children benefit from special time. So finding special times to spend with your typically developing child, making dates with your child, just like you make dates with your partner. So you're going to have lots of dates. So you have your dates with your partner to maintain your marriage, and you have dates with your other children to do things with them, to give them that one-on-one attention, to give them that time of yours. And it doesn't have to be every week. It doesn't have to be every month. But having those things scheduled means that they have importance, and it makes them feel that they have importance. So some families do put aside 15, 20 minutes a day just to have one-on-one time with their typically developing children, to review their day, to talk about what's going on. So it can be everything from that simple exploring the day through having a date with your child. Encouraging a closer relationship with the siblings. Kids have to understand their brothers or sisters' developmental disorder. They need information too. Working on helping them understand, working on helping them make a connection, something that they can do with that sibling that makes them feel good and makes their sibling with a developmental disorder feel good. There's lots of little things that can happen that will increase that feeling of bond and that relationship. Try to be fair. And this is something you're going to hear from your kids a lot. That's not fair. When you have a child with a developmental disorder and you have a typically developing child, sometimes we set up different rules. And that is where you're going to hear from your kids, that's not fair. He can hit me, but I can't hit him. Or you're going to hear, well, how come he gets to do that and I don't get to do that? So you want to try to make the rules as consistent as possible. And when they're not consistent, when the child with special needs does have different rules, you need to explain to your child why that is. And explain it in a positive manner. I know you can do this. Your brother can't do this. I know you can do this. That's why I have this rule for you. Because I want you to be the best grown-up you can be. Manage their negative feelings. That means you got to acknowledge them, and you got to be non-judgmental. So when your child is saying, I hate him, I just wish he would die, you got to be able to hear that and say, I know it's hard. I know he's making your life difficult right now. We're doing the best we can. It will get better. But you got to listen, and you got to accept those feelings. I actually have several kids on my caseload that are siblings, and that is the presenting issue. I hate my brother with autism. I hate my brother with cerebral palsy. He takes all of mom and dad's time. He gets away with everything. And that's what we're working on in therapy, is being able to express those feelings and talk those through. The last thing is setting up roles and responsibilities. Because kids with siblings with developmental disorders often feel the need, again, to be that super retainer, the person that's always doing the best of everything, sometimes they will assume roles, or we will give them roles and responsibilities that they're just not developmentally able to take care of yet. You don't want to put your 14-year-old in charge of your 8-year-old with autism who has terrible tantrums. That's unfair to both children. The 14-year-old can't manage the tantrums, and the 8-year-old can't manage the 14-year-old trying to manage the tantrums. So really setting up very appropriate roles and responsibilities can do a lot to help your child with stress around their siblings.